everyone. Good evening. Nice to meet y'all. Okay, give me a minute. Okay. So first of all, thank you so much, everybody, for taking your time on a Friday evening and tuning in to this webinar with Wen Jie, our mentor. He's an investment banking manager at FutureLab. So just to share with you, right, I understand a lot of the participants here today are very much new to FutureLab, and you may not know who are we and what are we. So I'll begin to give an introduction about us first. So FutureLab, we are an online mentoring platform where we like to connect youth, such as students, fresh grads, or even young working professionals to our industry mentors to help you to accelerate your career growth and to be able to help you land your dream career. So how we do it is that, once you join as a FutureLab mentee, you can book our mentor for one-on-one sessions, or you can even gain access to all our weekly group sessions, webinars, workshops, or even career accelerator programs, just to be able to help you to land your dream career once you've graduated. So yeah, again, thank you so much for taking our time here today. So before we begin, I would like to introduce myself first, as well as our guest mentor here. My name is Si Ting. I am a community manager of FutureLab. So my role here is to manage the mentors and mentees community and helping mentees like yourself to be able to find the right mentor for your very own career journey. And here we have is Wen Jie. He is a FutureLab mentor, and he is currently an investment banking manager at Maybank. So today, he will be talking about a career in investment banking. And the goal of the webinar today is to be able to expose you to the, the investment banking industries, and just to share with you what is his day-to-day like as an investment banker. Okay. So yeah, can we please have Wen Jie to introduce yourself, as well as share with us your career background, and maybe you can also share with us your journey transitioning between many of the finance corporates that you've been working at, such as PwC, as well as Maybank. Yeah.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Wen Jie. I'm currently working in the investment banking advisory department of Maybank. So I'll be, in general, overseeing transactions such as privatization, fundraising, restructuring, etc. Being a consultant to the various investment banking, I'll go into detail in terms of what is IB like at a later stage. But just a bit about myself. I started my journey as a auditor with PwC Malaysia. Spent about 5.5 years there, and then really I started to think about moving out to explore my interest in the capital market, and that's when I make a career pivot to KPMG Malaysia, where I was working with the corporate finance advisory department, again specializing a lot in terms of valuation of businesses, and also looking at doing things like feasibility studies for corporates from small size to large GLCs. And the exposure from KPMG allowed me to secure an opportunity in Maybank. Yeah. So I'm just going to give a brief summary, and then we'll go into detail later.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much, Wen Jie, for that very descriptive introduction. So just to share with you guys, please feel free to turn on your camera and interact with us if you wish. This is a very casual, laid-back webinar, so don't worry about,
Sorry,
being too formal. Yeah.
Your voice is a bit soft.
Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me better?
It was better earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How about now? Can you guys hear me? Still soft, isn't it?
Maybe it's my side.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's okay. Every webinar always sure got technical, everyone. Okay. So anyway, feel free to turn on your camera again, just to interact with me and Wen Jie. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put your questions into the chat box. Or if you're too shy to ask publicly, feel free to also personal message me the questions inside the chat box as well. We will address it very quickly during the Q&A session at the very end of the webinar. All right? Okay, awesome. So Wen Jie, would you mind sharing with us, right? What has drawn you to pursuing investment banking as a career? Like, What
Yeah.
made you want to venture into this career? And also, how did you build your career roadmap to get to where you are today?
All right, sure. That's I'm I hope I can give you a A to Z kind of recipe, but it didn't really happen to me naturally. I think it was a natural kind of progression for me. When I started off my journey in PwC, I started off with the intention of really brushing up my accounting technical skills because frankly, that wasn't my best suit back in uni. I wanted to become someone more well-rounded, and that's why I went to PwC. But I think if you look at my career roadmap, I spent a lot in my years in the firm, and that was really because I do enjoy the time spent there and the work that I did. But eventually, I sort of think I want to gravitate back to my core strength, which was finance, something that I really like. And then I was exploring career opportunity in terms of where can I pick up the necessary skill sets in order to become a better professional within investment banking. And it was at that point in time when I think it was, I was at a crossroad when I was thinking of moving out from PwC, when I was exploring, do I go to IB straight or move into advisory firm in Big Four? And after speaking around, then I realized that to brush up technical skills, you really have to be in Big Four to do it. And it was really because of how the industry was shaped at that point in time. To give you all some background, I think post 2007 financial crisis, a lot of those key work done in investment banking was subcon out to other professional services firm, be it legal firm or consulting firm for Big Four or even research firm out there. So in order to brush up technical, I joined KPMG. I think back then my mindset was really still to think eventually landing myself a role in IB, VE, VC or PE was very undecided. But and when I was looking out 2 years into KPMG, Maybank came knocking to my door with other opportunities as well. And I felt, all right, it is a good opportunity to work with one of the largest banks and also to gain broader exposure in terms of the deal process from origination all the way to execution. So that's why I chose to join Maybank. And main reason why I joined investment banking was really I'm passionate in terms of keeping up with economic development of the country and really being in Maybank. You are in the driver's seat on a day-to-day basis. You know what is going on in the market ahead from all the financial news. And think that is why I'm still in the bank. Yeah.
I see. Well, that is very interesting. You've come through a long way to get to where you are today. So, many of our participants today are actually accounting and business students. Maybe you can share with them, right? Like, what is investment banking as a whole? What is it really? And also, what do you do on a daily basis? Giving them the realistic point of view of what an investment banker is.
Yeah, all right. I think to address that question, I think there's a huge misconception about what investment banker do. Whenever I introduce myself, people will have the perception that investment banker out there trading shares against the market. But the truth is actually far from it. We don't actually do any trading at all. In fact, we are basically executing transaction, whether it's fundraising or other corporate transactions. So to give you that broad picture, to look at investment banking, there's always the back end, middle end, also front end within the industry. In terms of back end, you have the operation team, and also you have the finance department. And the middle end, you would have corporate finance helping you to handle all of your regularization plan, dealing with the regulators, etc., and also preparing the relevant documents to Bursa and also Security Commission. And on the front end, I think there's, I would say, three main functions. First one being equity capital market and so debt capital market. So these two department basically helps you to handle fundraising need for the client. And on the other hand, you would also have the client coverage department, who is something like a relationship manager, where the key product they sell to the end consumer will really be fundraising kind of services or even advisory services. And the third segment would be what I'm doing now, advisory. Yeah. So.
Interesting. Okay, so you mentioned you're doing advisory, right? Like that's the thing you're focusing on. So maybe you can share with us like what exactly do you do? What exactly does it encompass as a role? Yeah.
All right. Frankly speaking, I've been in the role for slightly over a year, but none of my projects are actually recurring in nature. I don't work on same type of transactions every day. If I have to give an example, let's say if I'm working on the IPO transaction, what happens on a day-to-day basis is if the project hasn't gone live, we usually receive an inquiry from a client who might be interested in doing a fundraise in the capital market. And what they do is that they will prepare a business plan and then they will ask us, hey, is our company financially strong enough? Is our equity growth story good enough in order for us to raise fund from the market? And as investment banking advisors like us, we would evaluate the pitch and then we will sort of give them a sense in terms of where they stand and is there any market interest at the moment for that type of company. And if everything goes well and the proposal goes through, then what we do is really, in my department, what we do is we build up the valuation for the company. All right. But that's a very technical bit of our work. And the other part is really doing heavy research and understanding where the company is being placed relative to its peers and also in the industry, and also to understand at what point in that business growth cycle is the company at, and would it be attractive for the wider investor audience? Because really what we do as an investment banking advisor is helping them to pitch to other large institutional fund, be it EPF, PNB, or even other asset management fund. And then at the later stage of the process, we are also involved in doing structuring, i.e. deciding which investor gets how much shares. All right, that kind of thing goes in the background in the investment banking department. And yeah, that's what we do from a fundraising kind of perspective.
I see. Wow, that is very interesting. So would you mind also sharing, right? How is the career progression like for investment banking? What is the career ladder like? Starting from the entry level to like top position level. Yeah.
Okay. I think considering the wider audience are really fresh grad, I think you would usually come in as an analyst in the banking department. And the most common route to enter is really to join our management trainee program, where you have the opportunity of rotating between a few departments, typically no more than 3 or 4. That's when you try to gauge your interest in that particular department, because sometimes understanding what we do is not really enough. When you go through the day-to-day work, then you would get a better gauge of whether do you actually like the work itself. And then it is a very hierarchy kind of structure in IB. So after joining as an analyst, you climb up to senior, assistant manager, and then you move on to manager, senior manager, associate director, and so on. But every bank has different structuring in terms of the title. But I would say in terms of career progression, it is not much different as compared to a Big Four accounting firm. Yeah, it is more structured.
I see. Okay, I'm also very curious about like how long does it take for you to advance to a different level, to a higher level? Yeah, for every stage. Yeah.
All right. I think there is no typical timeline in investment banking. I think at the junior stage, opportunities for fast track is definitely possible if you do very well, understanding your craft and being able to help out your senior and being more, how I say, self-driven, quick learner, that sort of thing. So if you're that type of person, fast track is not a problem. But when you hit a more senior stage, then really the amount of deal exposure matters, and also your network within the industry plays a heavier importance. And that is when the career progression might slow down, and then you have to spend more time building that kind of base in order for you to continue moving up in your career.
I see. So it does sound like deals exposure as well as networking are two very important elements to help you progress in this career path. Okay, interesting. Okay. So what key skills or technical knowledge that you think would be very highly required in order to be successful within this industry?
All right. I think people who typically join the investment banking program, are mostly high achiever, at least from what I've seen. Usually they have huge amount of extra co-curricular activity. They are president of some kind of club, active outside and also excelling academically. So these are the kind of people who typically join the firm. In terms of skill set, what we really look out for are people with very strong critical thinking. Definitely someone who is very curious about learning and also self-driven, especially at entry level. I think the learning attitude matters a lot because just looking at the requirements in completing a project under a short deadline, right? What you really need is a grit to survive when you're going through this kind of project on cycle to cycle basis. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Is it required to complete any professional papers or qualifications just to be able to enter this investment banking industry?
All right. I think talking about this, I think a lot of people would be thinking about CFA when they talk about joining investment banking. But frankly speaking, the market in Malaysia don't really prioritize CFA unless you're coming from a non-business slash accounting slash finance kind of background. Then yes, you would need to take a CFA to prove that you have some basic understanding of how finance work before you join the firm. But in the banking industry, what they really value is doing the security commission paper, which is almost like a mandatory no matter what kind of function you work at in banking, be it asset management or even corporate finance, ECM, DCM, and etc. Yeah.
I see. Okay, so professional papers aren't really required for Malaysia's job market. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, and then maybe just to share, I think within my department or even in my previous kind of work scope, we work a lot with engineers as well. And so I think don't have to think that even if you do a science degree, there's no way for you to transition into finance because, as I said, what we look at is really critical thinking. And if you're smart people, you would tend to have the opportunity to join the department. Yeah.
I see. Okay, so this is an interesting thing to look out for computer science or engineering students who are joining us today. So you don't necessarily have to come from a finance background to be able to enter the investment banking industry. So you have hope. Yeah. Okay. So how would you recommend one, maybe a fresh grad or potential job seekers to prepare for a job application or interview to pursue investment banking? How should they prepare in terms of interview? To be able to land the job.
All right. I think that particular individual has to be very deliberate in terms of crafting their background and also experiences. Drawing comparison with graduates from overseas, I think this process kickstart when you're in year one of uni, if possible, trying to secure industrial attachment or internship in relevant industries, ideally in investment banking or otherwise in fields similar to investment banking. So we are looking at things like strategy consulting, management consulting, or even doing advisory in Big Four firm. Having that kind of exposure puts you in a more advantageous position as compared to other candidates. So that's in terms of internship. The second point that I think department looks at is really how well-rounded the individual is. So it is not necessarily important for someone to score maybe flat 4 CGPA in their course. All right, what is important is that individuals demonstrating interest outside of the workspace, because I think it is a qualitative gauge for us to see how well the person manages their personal time outside of study. And usually people who can cover both sides, academic and also extracurricular well, they tend to do better in the department. Yeah.
I see. Okay, that is very interesting. So it is super important for students to be able to have a strong extracurricular background. Need to be super active in terms of like having leadership roles in clubs and societies. Yeah. Okay. So academic itself is not necessarily enough, is it?
I think wouldn't be right for me to downplay the importance as well. I mean, if you get CGPA of 4, that's great. That's
Okay.
great, but don't sacrifice other aspects, right? Yeah.
Yep, I
Yeah.
see. Okay, nice.
Yep.
Very good advice for the students here today. Okay, so speaking of your, now we're moving to speaking about your career experience, right? What has been your highlight so far being in the industry?
Kind of like, I would say being part of the team in winning large proposal. I think most recently, maybe I shouldn't talk about this. Being able to help clients to successfully do fundraising, I think that's very important because I think from an individual investor perspective, you might not appreciate that the entire IPO cycle, for example, would take at the minimum 9 months. It might sometimes go, the planning behind goes to 2 years or 3 years in order to, get together that pre-IPO planning right, and also to help securing the right investor for the company. So to complete that kind of deal brings a lot of satisfaction to me personally. Yeah.
I see. Okay. How about challenges? What have been your, tougher challenges that you have faced so far with your career journey?
I think personally, as a professional, the largest challenge would really be from a people perspective rather than work, because I believe work-wise, as long as you put enough effort, seek enough help from mentors or your friends around you, you will always be able to overcome it. I think what is tricky is always navigating the people aspect. From a student perspective, you will also appreciate that when you carry out a project, a lot of times you do it in a team, and if someone doesn't pull their weight, and then it really challenges your, you as an individual, looking at how you manage the situation, how can you still complete the project, even with that setback. And you will see this kind of team recurring as you progress along your career journey. And it could also be something as simple as, I think I remember back in my audit days, you have to do a lot of coordination for work travel. So not only do you need to focus on your work, you have to try and schedule, book the hotel, your travel trips, making sure everyone can travel on time, that kind of stuff. I think a lot of those problems creeps up when you work. Yeah.
I see. Okay. But I guess I also see it as a way to upskill yourself in terms of team management, and how do you communicate with people? How do you align expectations with people? I feel like these skills is also very important, not only for investment banking, for many other industries as well. So yeah, I guess it is a challenge, but we can also see it as an opportunity to also upskill ourselves. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Speaking of, because you've mentioned that you have to face clients in terms of closing deals and stuff, right? So what would be your advice, especially for the working professionals that are joining here today? What would be your advice in terms of building and maintaining a long-term professional relationship with your clients?
All right. I think this will be a common challenge across all professions. It's not limited to investment banking. As the key challenge would be really to build trust between yourself and the client, because in the absence of trust, really, there is no room for you to even open a discussion to talk about what kind of solution can you bring for the client. So this really tests you as a professional, whether are you able to build a good repertoire of the client, even before the job start, understand them as a human being. I think that is very important, because you have to remember everyone is ultimately still a human. Don't be dictated by who you are professionally and as a job, and also think about how would the person feel emotionally when they receive comments from your end. So I think good EQ is very important, and then using that, try to establish trust with the client. Yeah.
Wow, sounds like a lot of empathy has to be involved as well for investment banking. Interesting. Okay, so before I proceed to the next question, I would like to remind everyone that you are also able to ask Wen Jie any questions that you would like. So if you do have any questions, or if you're curious about something that was not answered here today, feel free to put it into the chat box, or you can personal message me as well, and I'll bring it up during the Q&A session later. Okay? All right, so let us proceed. So in your opinion, right, what
Yep.
will be the impact of artificial intelligence in the investment banking industry? Since we know that many things are moving towards digitalizations right now, what do you think will be the impact of AI to this industry?
Yeah, I think it will be too hard to categorize the impact of AI to investment banking on a broad basis. But if I'm looking at advisory in specific, I think what it could help is really to help us to siphon through, make our origination process much better. I think for students out there, origination really mean creating deals, all right, marrying both buyers and sellers in the market, because a lot of times right now what we do is we leverage on software platforms, be it Bloomberg or S&P IQ, right, Capital IQ, to do that work. But if AI is able to carry out that process with a preset algorithm, then that will make the process easier for us. But undeniably, investment banking is still a very relationship-based kind of work. So in terms of disruption, I would say it will be minimal for an IB sector. But I do see more impact from a commercial banking kind of perspective. Yeah, simply because you are able to really provide your access for funding is globalized. Firstly, right now, banking is a really domestic focused kind of work. If you have a bank in Malaysia, you're primarily serving customers in Malaysia. But with digital banking and also neo banking, your target audience is much wider, and AI would help commercial banking a lot more and impact that sector a lot more. Yeah.
I see. Okay, thanks for sharing that thought with us.
Yeah.
Okay, there's this one question that a lot of people are also very curious about, right? How is the work-life balance like for an investment banking? A lot of the students actually ask, is it stressful? So maybe you can enlighten them on this.
All right. I think short answer to that is yes, it is very stressful. Otherwise, you wouldn't be paid well. So, but the other thing to look at it is this is a very project focused kind of work. So you have a lot of project coming in, then definitely it will be, how would I say, you really have to embrace work-life integration in that sense. And I think it applies the same across different kind of work, especially having done advisory and also audit. I think it is very similar. There's technically not much work-life balance, but I would say there are sometimes more downtime when you're doing project basis kind of work, because you really can't, how would I say, you can't plan a project to say, oh, I'm going to put everything from June to December, unlike audit, for example. So it is more unplanned, but sometimes you'll get a lot more free time in investment banking too, depending on the gap between projects. Yeah.
All right. Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing. I believe the question was answered by many students. Okay, so I guess I'll move on to Q&A right now. I did receive a few anonymous questions, so I'll bring it up. But again, if anyone else have any questions, please feel free to put in the chat box and we will address it, okay? So some of the participants here today are actually coming from computer science background and non-finance background, right? I understand that you are from finance background yourself in terms of education, but perhaps you can also share some insights for graduates who come from non-finance background. How can they, venture into this career path in investment banking? Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think some of the examples that have come through during my career journey would be for this type of candidates, what they'll do, they'll be actively participating in business case competition. I think there's a few very prominent ones going on in Malaysia. One would be the Maybank Go competition. That's one. And there's also a few offered by other consulting firms like the AT Kearney case competition. So to participate in such competition, it enhances your visibility and again, helps you to differentiate yourself with other candidates. And I think why you have to be very deliberate in terms of pursuing for specific experiences like this is because opening for analyst position, for example, investment banking is really very few, especially from a Malaysia market perspective. At any one point in time, maybe there's only 10 positions and you have to compete with both domestic and overseas graduates to get a position to be in IB. So that's why creating more unique differentiator for yourself is very important. Yeah.
I see. All right. So actually, I received a question. Actually, I received 3 questions.
Okay.
She DM'd me, right? But I'll ask on her behalf anonymously. So her first question is, how long is the duration for every investment banking project approximately?
How long? I would say, unlike being in a consulting firm, that journey is very, very long. For me, the longest I've seen, 5 years long. Basically, as an advisor, it is very different from a consultant, basically, because you're looking at advising a company throughout their whole business growth journey. Whereas for a consultant, you're looking at specific tasks. And that's why projects tends to be short-term in nature. In a consulting environment, you might be finishing it between 1 to 6 months. But in IB, I think conservatively, you will take 9 months to maybe 3 years, 4 years on average to finish a project. So if you're someone who derive joy from completing projects very, very quickly, you might not see that in an investment banking kind of environment. Yeah.
Sounds like you have to be very, very patient.
Yeah.
To be in this career. Okay.
Yeah.
And how like what does it depend on? I mean, the duration of a project, right? What does it depend on? Is it depending on the skill of the team or like, yeah?
All right. I think, as I mentioned previously, toughest part of all jobs with the people aspect. So in a particular job, the people nature come into every phase. So for example, if you cannot secure the right investor base for that particular fundraise, then you have a delay. Or if suddenly the country go into COVID and that impacted their financials for next quarter, and that also affects its marketability to the wider audiences. And your company might say, all right, maybe we'll stay put and see how do we recover post-COVID before we consider fundraisers. Or it could be external factors like regulatory and not approving because they do not see how is that business model viable. Or it can be things that you cannot control, like political factor. Yeah. So there's a lot of factor that may disturb a transaction. And that is why it is also, how would I say, that's why it takes a lot of time, because sometimes you receive an instruction at 10 at night because someone from top might say, all right, I have approved, and then let's continue going on with that deal cycle. And then you have to prepare to work on it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Okay, moving on to a second question, right? Are the salaries or benefits of investment banking greater than that of an auditor / Big Four?
Yeah, I think in general, it is. Especially from a working level perspective, at every rank, you definitely rated more. And I think it's a function of demand and supply. So it's not to say that an audit it is not so good relative to investment banking, but rather you have a lot more candidates working in auditing firm, right? So if there's such a large supply, then there's a lesser need of you remunerating them to keep them working, all right? That's looking from an employer perspective. And then you compare and contrast that with investment banking, where departments are generally no more than 15 or 20 packs. That's why you're able to pay them more. Yeah.
I see. Okay. So that meaning to say there's not many roles. I mean, there's not many investment banker itself in a firm, is it?
Yeah, I would
not
say
as many as auditor.
Correct. Yeah, if you're just comparing these two professions, then it is a very niche kind of profession. So I think that's also one thing for candidates to consider. I think the more specialized your skill is, and the more likely you'll be remunerated well. I think that's the key takeaway.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. So moving on to her third question, right? Her question is how to prepare if there's an exam when applying for investment banking entry level. Is there any specific module that the candidates have to focus on?
Yeah. All right. Exam, all right. Not aware whether there's an exam. Typically, there might be case studies provided by investment bank depending on the banks that you're looking at. And I think it could be as broad as a writing question to gauge how well you express yourself in English. And there might be some random critical skill questions being tested. So those are your online quiz kind of stuff. But from an interview perspective, that might also ask you stuff on valuation. How do you see the economy? They'll gauge your interest to the profession. So to answer that question, I would say you really have to get yourself solid from a finance kind of perspective. Yeah, be it understanding things like DCF, market valuation, why is PE better than EV, EBITDA, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I see. So you have to equip yourself with the current trends regarding the market and everything, just to be prepared for the interview. Okay. Yeah. So I have another question from an anonymous participant as well. Yep. So her question is, what do you look for in an analyst? Again, it's an entry level, right? When you interview them.
I think we touched on this a few times before this. So I think on paper, really, does that candidate stand out from an academic perspective? What are the interesting that individual has been doing outside of academic? That's two things, because even before an interview, you are being compared on a resume perspective with all the other candidates. So you have to strike out as a very unique individual on paper first. Yeah. And then when you come for the interview, what we look at is your ability to present yourself. How do you carry yourself as an individual? Because how well you do it matters, as you might have some chances to interact with client. So we need to make sure that you're able to do it in a real life scenario. So that's looking at it from a practical perspective. And the other thing that we really look at is really your passion in the industry. The thing about fake it till you make it, it might work. But when you're comparing against multiple candidates, it could really, I think it really stands out whether do you really know your stuff. Because you can tell someone who really live and breathe finance and economics, someone who wakes up, study the market day in, day out. That candidate is very different from someone who is doing that 1 or 2 weeks before the interview. So really, it has to be part of your life even before you go for that job, because otherwise you are not able to show that you're genuinely interested in the industry.
Okay. So another question is regarding the case studies, right? So we know that to apply to become a consultant, you also have to fulfill a certain hours of case study, right? Is it the same for investment bankers? Or not necessarily, like you have to fulfill a certain hours of case studies assessment?
Not really. I don't think there's a hour restriction, but rather it depends on how does the investment bank assess you. So if they give you a case study, most likely it will be on the spot. You don't really get the time to prepare. So if you go there and meet the investment bank, they might say, all right, take the next 1 or 2 hours to complete these few questions. And then that's it. You bring the case study, your interviewer will look at it, and then they will just test your logical thinking. How do you think through when solving questions? And then also understanding you as an individual after. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks for that. So Ryan has a question. His question is how possible it is to transition from transaction advisory to investment banking.
How possible? All right. Okay. I would say definitely doing transaction advisory gives you some kind of exposure in terms of deal cycle, albeit it is still not giving you that full investment banking of experience. So how likely? I would say you have a 50-50 chance. But in order to become more positively 50, right? Deal exposure is very important. What kind of deal you work on? If it's more geared towards M&A, that will help you to shine better. And also looking at the clientele that you work with matters as well, depending on the banks that you apply. So if you're working with larger banks in the market, be it larger ones in Malaysia or the overseas one, having more branded client would matter in your application and helps you to stand out more as compared to a pure IB candidate.
Okay, great. I hope that answers your question, Ryan. Okay, so I just received another question. Okay, so her question is, what do you need to do in order to transition from auditing to investment banking?
All right. I think the first thing is to acknowledge that it is very difficult for you to move directly from auditing to investment banking, because ahead of you in the queue, you have lawyers, you have advisors, consultant. So you wouldn't stand out as a candidate to most employer unless there's a severe shortage in talent, then maybe you would stand a chance. But what is important is actually to find other type of platform in order to you to develop the right skill set to transition into IB. And like I mentioned before, joining a Big Four, working in advisory, whether is it with the corporate finance, valuation, or M&A department, it really helps you to position you better to move on to IB. Yeah.
Okay, great. I hope that answers the question. All right. Okay. So I guess that is pretty much all the questions I have received. Yep. So I think before we properly end the webinar, maybe you could give some advice to our participants here today who have an interest, right, to pursue a career in investment banking. What would be your final advice to the participants today?
All right. My final advice would definitely be, you can book a separate mentoring session with me, and then we can go through it in detail because it's a recorded event. So there might be details that I might not be able to share because of the sensitivity. But I guess in the end, keep your mind open, because investment banking might not be the ideal route for most people. And if you're interested in making this transition from a young working professional kind of perspective, you really have to make certain sacrifices because the kind of experience that you build up in your existing role might not be fully applicable. So you have to be prepared to take a salary cut in order to learn more and gain the skill sets required in order to grow yourself. Because frankly speaking, why would someone pay you more when you don't have any demonstrated experiences? So be prepared for that. From a fresh grad kind of perspective, you have to acknowledge that you're competing with hundreds of individuals, depending on the banks that you apply at. So be active, take on more leadership position. And I think there are no short of volunteering opportunities out there. I think even volunteering for FutureLab sounds like a very good opportunity, especially for you to gain more experiences in practicing your social speaking and also meeting up with people in the industry, because industry experience also helps you as a professional later on. So yeah, keep yourself active and try not to focus too much on academic. Yes, you have to be good at it. But I think what is lacking for most graduates nowadays is really your ability to speak and also to voice out your ideas. I think that is very important. Yeah.
That's really great advice. Thanks so much, Wen Jie. So yeah, I hope all the students will take the advice into action and start actually taking the right action tomorrow. So before we actually end, right, a mentee also anonymously added more questions. So if you don't mind, we will continue the conversation. So her question is, can an investment banker hold more than one project?
Can we hold more than one project?
Yeah.
Oh, if your concern is holding project, that's definitely not a problem. The problem is really holding too many projects in investment banking. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But that answers the question, right? How much can you take? Okay. Second question is, can the candidates mention their clients or company's name from their previous projects in their resume?
Okay. I think the best practice, especially in the field of advisors, be it legal, financial, is really not to quote your client name, especially in the resume. You can make very descriptive descriptions in the resume to describe maybe what industry is the client from, is it a Fortune 500 company, etc. So that will help the interviewer to gauge, because most of us would be able to recognize what kind of company is it, even though you don't name it. So just to be professional, don't name the companies. Yeah.
All right, got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that was the, oh no, there's one more question.
No problem.
It's okay, keep it coming, guys. We still have
we still have time.
10 minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so a mentee asked, right? Is entrepreneurship one of the qualities that investment banking look for?
I think definitely. And in fact, I think it would definitely make you even more standout candidate as compared to other people. I haven't seen anyone who's doing entrepreneurship pivoting to IB though, but I think it will be very attractive for sure.
Okay, nice. All right. So is there any other questions? I'm giving you guys 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. No worries to those who haven't gotten your questions answered. I mean, maybe you have questions, but you haven't been able to phrase them yet. That's okay. Like Wen Jie said, you can definitely book him for a one-on-one session after the webinar. So what's going to happen is that all of you, all the participants here today, are going to get rewarded with 3 free mentorship credits, where you can book Wen Jie for another 3 one-on-one sessions to continue the conversations, right? If let's say you are very much interested to pursue a career in investment banking, can get advice from him. Yeah.